Hello, students. Michael Sanchez, violin teacher, with you today. Thanks so much for joining me here on this webinar. So basically, this webinar is all about helping you guys understand more about the fiddle. So I'm doing these every week through the end of the contest, and if you watch this particular recording, you will get 25 entries to the contest for my violin bow giveaway. And then for Jeff and Kathy, who are here right now with us, they will get 100 entries to have that much bigger chance to win the bow. So just got done talking to Jeff a little bit, and he basically is just getting back into learning. So he's interested in both violin and fiddle. Yeah, I'd like to just talk about the differences and kind of give you guys some insights throughout this class. And then, yeah, randomly throughout this class, I will give a code for you guys to have, which will give you the ability to give those entries for watching the class. Awesome. So basically, the biggest thing, for somebody that doesn't know anything about violin or fiddle, the fiddle and the violin are the same instrument. The only thing that differs from one to the next is that they are played quite differently as far as the style. So when you play the violin, you're playing more in a way that's more elegant, as far as you're doing a lot more vibrato, you're doing a lot more shifting, a lot more technique up the fingerboard. You're not doing things like you would do with fiddle, like sliding into notes that make it sound real fun, or down slides. With fiddle, you also have a lot more improvisation and ornamentation, which basically is where you have a particular set of notes. Instead of just playing it the same way every time like you would with a violin or classical violin, you improv, or you change the notes a little bit and you add little things to it to make it sound different. So something like I'll just take a song. So let's say Arkansas Traveler. So that was kind of basic. So I could add some little grace notes in there and change up the rhythm a little bit to make it sound different. Because yeah, basically what I said there is I played it in a classical way, but now I'm going to play it in a fiddle way. So I'm going to slide. I'm going to do some little ornaments, and I'm going to change the rhythm. So now instead of just the basic what I did, I'm going to play different. So. Doing things like droning, like basically where you're putting two strings together. Typically with fiddle, you're doing, you're basically playing on one string, and then also you're playing an open or no fingers down string, and that's called a drone. So that's a very common, ornamentation that you'll add on to your fiddle music. Yeah, so basically it's all about, learning the different styles. So I'm the author of the book Fiddle for Dummies, which if you guys have ever heard of 4 dummy books out there for pretty much anything, I wrote the fiddle version. About a year of my life away. And basically everything in the first part of the book, the first half of the book, is, can apply to both violin and fiddle. It's all technique. It's all learning the basics of, you have to set up the left hand properly. You have to set up the bow hand properly. Even though fiddle players tend to have a little bit worse habits in general, some of the best fiddle players in the world are classically trained. Mark O'Connor, for example, if you guys want to check him out on YouTube, he's one of the best. And basically, once you learn violin, it makes it, not that challenging to branch off into fiddle. So somebody that comes to me that wants to learn the fiddle, I don't necessarily recommend that they start right on the fiddle unless they insist. Because with learning the basics of violin, like learning your scales, learning your techniques, your drills, all the things that apply to everybody that learns violin for the first year or at least 6 months, I normally recommend for students to go through the first 1 or 2 books of Essential Elements, which is basically like your beginner violin training. And then once they get through that, then they can branch off and do either both or just primarily, just focus on the fiddle. So it really comes down to your ability, just to be a little disciplined to learn some of those things, you know, that you might not want to learn, but they're going to really help you. You know, learning all those violin fundamentals and techniques is really beneficial to learn the fiddle. So, you know, having your bow hold proper. So a lot of fiddle players, you know, their bow hold's way up here because technically fiddle players don't play a lot at the frog. Violin players play in this area, especially when they start doing what's called spiccato, which is a more advanced technique. But fiddle players can sort of get away with having their bow hold up because they don't really have to play in that area. But I don't like when that happens because it shortens the bow, and you know the weight transfer kind of gets manipulated, and you know ultimately you can't kind of branch off into classical violin if you ever wanted to later on, which is kind of a shame. You know, if you start on fiddle and then all of a sudden you want to learn something classical or you want to play in church or something, you're sort of held back and restricted. So, you know, learning everything the right way is what I recommend. You know, learning the proper bow hold, you know, having your hand, you know, over the stick properly, having the thumb curved and relaxed, not pressing up against the bow with your pinky and thumb. It happens all the time with most players, fiddle or violin. And all the drills that I recommend, as far as my index drill, my rocking bow drill, my wrist drill, all the things that you guys have seen on my webinars, my classes, applies to learning the fiddle, because you know it's all those drills and fundamentals help you to get a better sound on the instrument, either instrument. So yeah, I would say fiddle players tend to kind of not do scales. They don't do as much, you know, exercises. They don't do as many drills, and they can sort of get away with it to a point because a lot of the music, it's sort of simple. It's all sort of in the same key, C, D, and G. You can kind of, they say that like 99% of fiddle tunes are in those three keys. So they can kind of get away with it. And the thing is, I've seen it all the time. People that have interest in fiddle, they get frustrated when they get to a certain level. So they kind of peak. So they kind of go and they're learning basic tunes, and they have these, you know, kind of bad habits, and they're still able to kind of pull it off. But then they come to me 2 years later and they're like frustrated because they can't sound good in a Chopin farewell, you know, because, you know, that song requires vibrato and it requires bow sustainment, requires good tone. And, you know, I've seen it time and time again, people that are interested in fiddle, sort of, you know, have some struggle, and they sort of peak and they get frustrated. So yeah, you know, there's no difference to everything I teach with either the violin or the fiddle. It's just a matter of the different style. So yeah, raise your hand if that makes sense. We have 3 students with us right now. There's a raised hand feature. Jeff, thank you. Kathy, I see that you're trying to coordinate yourself there. Would love for you to come on. I can unmute you. How are you doing?
Good.
How long have you been playing? Where are you from?
10 years, living in Arizona for the winter, and then Minnesota, summertime.
Oh, okay. Excellent. So classically trained violinist and then interest in fiddle, or?
Oh my, no, I didn't start till I was a lot older. And it's, I've been doing mostly fiddle music, some bluegrass, because my husband plays a lot of bluegrass. I would go to all festivals, and yeah, so mostly fiddling, but I have been working through the Suzuki books and trying to get better with the bowing, and intonation is coming pretty good, but the bowing is always the hard part for me.
Okay, so you're coming kind of more towards the starting fiddle side and then branching off into violin side.
Right, to get better. I did play in a string ensemble last winter, and so that was good experience.
Okay, well, it's actually rare to see that. It's only the other way around. It's cool to see that. So have somebody start with fiddle and have kind of branch off into classical.
Right, that's because I was getting frustrated with not being quite where I wanted to be with intonation and yeah, musicality, all that. Yeah.
So really the first, the last 5 minutes of what I've been talking about, you can relate to.
Right.
Yeah, I've seen it time and time again. I give you an example of one of my students. He was more fiddle based. He wanted to learn, you know, Shokin Farewell on different tunes, you know, bluegrass music, Celtic music, and he would practice like crazy. Like he would just practice and practice and practice, but he could not get a good vibrato. You know, he just couldn't. And it really was because he wasn't doing things properly. He wasn't holding, you know, the fiddle or violin, whatever you want to call it, correctly. He was overpressing into the fingerboard. He was, you know, basically just tense everywhere. You know, everything was tense. And, you know, when you're tense, it doesn't matter how much you practice, you're actually hurting yourself because you're practicing the wrong way. You know, if you're tense all the time and you're practicing like crazy, you're learning to be tense. So, so yeah, he basically came in and he really was like at his peak, like where he was about to quit. He's like, about to throw in the towel, can't do this. You know, I really want to sound good. I'm just not happy where I'm at after 6 years. You know, I think he was in his late 60s at the time. And yeah, a lot of encouragement, a lot of just explaining to him why things were the way they were, you know. I think that's a lot what fiddle players don't hear is just, you know, why you sound bouncy and scratchy and your vibrato is not very good. And it's just all fundamentally driven. You know, it's all just things aren't being done as well as they could be. So yeah, I basically worked with him with a lot of drills, a lot of scales, a lot of fundamentals, a lot of explanation. And he started getting really, really happy because he started to sound much better. And his vibrato finally came along. And yeah, about 2 years later, he actually played in my recital. So he was kind of that guy that would never, ever do that. And then all of a sudden he did, and it was pretty cool. So yeah, basically, you know, it really applies to everything, fundamentals and technique. So, you know, being able to do your bluegrass bowings, being able to do, you know, your fast Irish playing, you know, that all comes from good technique. You know, if you're not rocking the bow properly up and down when you're changing bow playing, you know, you're going to have a time getting a clean sound, you know, when you're doing your Irish tunes. You're probably only going to use so much bow, you know, and then, you know, your bow playing is not going to be as accurate. So, I mean, having your elbow above the instrument on G, even with instrument on D, just below on A, and then at your side on the E string, that's going to help your bow playing. And I couldn't imagine playing Orange Blossom Special cleanly without having that bow playing. You know, to do the you know, to have that elbow doing what it needs to be doing, you know, that was a fiddle tune, you know, and that was, you know, a lot of fiddle players that have their elbow way down here, they're changing strings like this, you know, or they're holding the bow up here, and, you know, or they're holding the bow at the tips of the fingers, but having it more over the top, you know, where your fingers and your hand is relaxed, and you're able to get that flexibility that's needed. Because yeah, a lot of fiddlers don't understand flexibility. You know, the bow needs to be flexible. So at all times, I should be able to grab your bow and circle it around like this. And you should give me no restriction whatsoever. But a lot of times, yeah, so let's say you're really digging into a fiddle tune, an Irish piece, and I grab your bow, most likely it's like this, right? And that's what causes that bad sound. So having that bow hand properly over the stick, the thumb curved, huge bad habit right here, you know, just overall having that flexibility like this, you know, that's going to help you cross strings easier, play faster, you know, and that's just with the right hand, you know. So if I was to play, you know, like an Irish tune, you know, with a lot of string crossings, you know, so right there, I mean, just me crossing strings, you know, if I had bad technique, or I was moving my elbow, or my grip was, you know, tense, or I was pressing with the thumb, all these, I wouldn't be able to play that fast. So yeah, every, like, player that, you know, players that play for competition and stuff like that, they normally always get some sort of classical training, you know, along with, because they need it. They have to, because they want to get that clean sound. So yeah, Kathy, what are some of the things that that you are working on, or you're finding struggle with, with trying to improve at your level?
Well, like I said, better bowing, and also always working on vibrato.
Yep.
So yeah, just because I like to get a really good tone.
Yep.
So,
Are you willing to play? If not today, maybe next week. Would love to help you out, give you some tips if you'd like.
Oh, maybe.
Okay. I know everybody's different with that. Some people are like, no way.
Yeah.
So yeah, all constructive if you end up deciding to. But yeah, I mean, like, with like some, are you doing vibrato and fiddle tunes, or are you saying like with your classical music and stuff like that?
Well, a little bit, some of the fiddle tunes, the waltzes that are a little slower. And yeah, of course, in the classical tunes too. Yeah.
Yep. And you really relate to that tension concept. It's really limiting that tension.
Uh-huh.
Like, putting, fingers down on the tips, when you're placing, a lot of students, what they do is they overpress into the fingerboard. So they're putting too much pressure down and they're tensing that hand up, and it makes it harder to play fast and do vibrato to actually move the hand back and forth. So very important to be on the very tips, the edges of the fingers. So try to aim right before the nail. That's the hardest part of the skin. That's where you can press the least and still get the proper pressure.
Right.
So what I recommend, to you guys out there watching, try to practice a scale and just try to have minimal pressure, and then every note that you're trying to play, try to loosen up and see if you still get the ring sound of the note. If you don't get the ring sound, it sounds dead like this, right? But if you get the ring, right? So experiment with that. Actually do pizzicato. So put your thumb in the corner of the fingerboard and just pick the strings and see if you can practice lessening your pressure and working on your finger contact. That's going to help you a lot as you try to play fast. So, I would maybe do a scale like this. Like that. So, and one tip, and think of this, there's so many students I've helped with on this week, this concept. So from here on down, the hand should not be moving. Okay, so a lot of you guys, as you're playing, and a lot of fiddle players are moving way too much of their hand to come in and out for notes. So it has to be more, your fingers are squeezing back and extending. That's going to help you play fast and be more accurate. That helps a lot with Orange Blossom Special. So that's really important. So yeah, finger contact. A lot of fiddlers, and for you guys out there, no matter what you're working on, try to at least do scales for at least a third of your practice sessions. Work on it with a tuner. So basically, have a tuner on your music stand, and then the one I have, it's called INS Tuner Light, free. And what's nice about it is it actually lights up different colors based on if you're in tune or not. So if you're right on, it's green. If you're a little off, it's yellow. If you're kind of off more, it's orange. So you can actually use that. Let's see if I can see my cracked phone. But see, it's yellow right there. So yellow is actually not bad. I try to have my students aim to have every note of a scale be yellow at minimum, obviously for the aim of it being green. But yeah, I mean, for a lot of you guys out there that don't do a lot of that training, you're going to sound more in tune in your pieces. Scale, I can't tell you enough how much scales helps your overall ability in both violin and fiddle. So every student that comes in for lessons, at one time I had 80 private students. Every student, doesn't matter what they say to me, I convince them to do scales, because scales is vital. It helps out intonation, helps you to be able to find your notes, in tune when you're playing songs. It helps you to segment technique, so you're working on technique and not having all these other things going on, so you can focus on left hand. It does so much, and being that the violin is fretless, fiddle's fretless, you have to practice good muscle memory. of how your fingers are being placed onto the fingerboard. So if you're, doing things just in your songs and thinking that's going to help you, it's likely that you're building some bad habits. For example, very commonly, I actually was working on this with a student earlier, when you place a finger down, you guys might be lifting your other fingers up in the back. This implies that you're overpressing, okay? And what it does is it makes it harder to play fast. You can't play your fiddle tunes fast when your fingers are flying up in the air. And also it hurts your intonation. So you guys have to work on simplicity, which can be done through scales. So, try to focus on keeping your fingers down at all times, which actually helps you to find other notes. So for example, if you have, let's say, your first finger down and you're trying to hit an F natural on the D string, there's no need to lift this finger up to play that note. It's much more efficient and much more accurate, and you're going to be able to play faster by leaving it down, and then your second finger is just nicely placed next to it. Or let's say you have a third finger down, use that 3 to find your 2 and lift it up at the last second, like that. So I'm being efficient with my finger placement, so that can all be worked on through scales. So I would, if you're sort of anti-scales and you haven't done any of it, start with like one basic scale, like a G major scale, which is basically second finger high on the G, on the D, and then second finger low on the A and the E. It's a really good scale to start with. Recommend that. And then doing a D major scale 1 octave and then maybe 2 octaves, which is going in the 3rd position. C major is also going in 3rd position, but you could just do 1 octave. This is 2 octaves. Shift. Like that. So that's your C major. Also, A major is good for fiddling because, there's a lot of tunes in the key of A. So we have first finger on the G, it starts. High 3, C sharp, G sharp. Like that. And what you can master is also your arpeggios with your scales. And the reason for that is learn improvisation, basically to play along with other people, to play with your guitar players, to do jam sessions where you don't have music, where you just have chord progressions. You want to know your notes of a chord, which is basically practiced by your arpeggios. Okay, so you can do the G major scale, and come back down, and the arpeggio of that is. And basically what that is it's 3 different letters. It's G, it's B, and it's D. Okay, so those are the 3 letters of a G major chord, which is what a guitar player is strumming as they're playing. And if you really master that, if you really know those letters that you're putting down, you're going to be able to do improvisation. You're going to be able to jam with a guitarist, jam in a jam session. So I recommend practicing your scales and your arpeggios as much as possible. And, if you're a little more advanced, maybe Kathy, you're a little more advanced, doing different bowings along with those scales, doing, let's say, getting the bow to really open up. A lot of fiddle players, they only use so much bow. They're kind of in this restricted area. I'm not assuming that's you, Kathy, but just in general. So doing whatever you can to open up your stroke. So, you want to be able to extend and bend to warm up. When you're playing, those waltzes like you mentioned, and those, slower pieces, you want to have that ability to really open up your stroke, and that's where you kind of warm up with your bowing. For example, you could do like 4 notes in a bow. 2 notes in a bow, 4 notes in a bow, like. Something like that's a good warm up. As you get more advanced with classical, Kathy, you probably can relate to this. Doing, even more upper scales, getting up into, third and fifth positions is good practice. Anything that's going to drill you, really just getting familiarized with the fingerboard, just knowing the letter. I think the one thing for the fiddle that I would do more than classical is really master the theory side of it, knowing what letters I'm placing at all times. So, for example, when I'm in the key of G, I know that there's one sharp. I know that's F sharp. I know where the F sharps are on the violin. I couldn't imagine not knowing where the F sharps are. And that's where a lot of fiddle players fail, is they don't know where the F sharps are, and then they hit an F natural and it sounds out of tune. So F sharp is second finger high on the D string. It's also first finger natural on the E string. And when you're in the key of G, that's where your fingers have to go. So the second I see one sharp in the key signature, I know that I need to make sure that I hit F sharp. So I'm kind of in my mind, I'm thinking I need to make sure I don't play F natural, right? I'm also thinking I do not want to play C sharp. I want to play a C natural, okay? So, and knowing where the C's are in the instrument, so we have third finger on the G string is C, and low second finger on the A string is C. The second that we hit the key of D, now we have C sharp. Now the second finger is here, okay, and the third finger is here instead of here. So basically, when I'm going between the key of G or the key of D, that's what's fluctuating. So I'm constantly changing this on the D, the F sharps and F natural. I'm constantly changing this, the C sharp, the C natural. So whether you're doing a jam session, whether you're reading sheet, it's a really important concept. And knowing where these letters are on the fingerboard is really good. You could get like a finger tape, which could show you exactly where the letters are. That's one thing you could do. Or just study it through, seeing it on an image or something. And yeah, I mean, so basically, like if I was to say to you, Kathy, can you play for me all the B flats on the instrument? Could you just boom, boom, boom? So could you go B flat, where those are? That's good to know. Or if I say, where are all the E flats? I know where those are. So that's really, really good to know. The theory side. So, I mean, understanding the theory side and rhythm is really important for improvisation and for fiddle. Because, yeah, if you're adding notes, if you're adding ornamentation into fiddle music, you can't just add notes over here and then not come back to the beat, right? You have to add, but then know when it's coming back. So that's a really important part of fiddle training as well. Cool. Any questions so far?
No.
You're nodding your head in agreement to a lot of what I'm saying, sounds like.
Yeah.
As in maybe you've heard most of it and you're thinking, yep, that's true.
Well, yeah, good reminders about the notes, naming the notes as you're playing them.
Yep.
Make sure what the names are. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Jeff actually has a question, looks like. He says, where does a flattened bridge play into the equation? Yeah, so Jeff, basically fiddle players tend to prefer flatter bridges. Reasoning, they play a lot of drones, they play a lot of, in violin it's basically a double stop, but in fiddle it's more called a drone, which is basically where you're playing a fingered note along with an open string. And with that, it's basically easier for fiddle players in general for them to have a flatter bridge. They don't have to have a flatter bridge. That's just kind of what is in general preferred for fiddle players. Honestly, my thought process on that is that a fiddle player likes that because they don't have as good a technique to be able to do the droning properly on an arc bridge. So that's kind of my thing. It's easier for them to kind of just play on two strings when they're not as arced. It takes a little bit less of good bow playing, I think, but that's just my theory. But yeah, I prefer a more arced bridge being a classical player. That's a really good question, though. That is one of the things that, a fiddle player would say it's sort of different between a violin and a fiddle. is that a fiddle in general, it has a flatter bridge, but it's not really the characteristic of it. It's just kind of what a fiddle player prefers more. Good question. Keep them coming if you have them. I see you have another student here that's be promoted onto the panel. Feel free to come on. Maeve, how you doing? Hello, how you doing? Tell us where you're from and how long you've been playing. I will unmute you now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm originally from Des Moines, Iowa. I'm in Oberlin, Ohio right now. I'm going to college. I've been playing 14 or 15 years. I think that's how numbers work. Yeah.
Excellent.
A little less actively now because I'm not majoring in violin performance and I have all sorts of other things going on, but yeah.
Excellent. So you started on violin and are branching off or have interest in fiddle, or kind of what's the story on the fiddle side of it?
Yeah, so the fiddle aspect of that is just like sort of a casual thing that I do at home. There's a group of Irish traditional musicians who just sort of meet up and play for fun back home. And so I sort of spend time around them. I would be interested in learning more about fiddle, especially since there's a lot of like fiddle technique that just doesn't come into play in classical training. I cannot improvise to save my life. I can't even do my own ornamentation, and I would love to learn more about that.
Okay, thank you for that feedback. There's so many different elements of fiddle, talking about so many different angles of it. So I'm actually glad you brought that up because, yeah, that's a huge part of it that I really enjoy teaching. I really enjoy teaching the improv part because, yeah, it's fun to be able to jam, I've played with all different types of bands over the years, and they never give me any music. Those guys, I tell you. You kind of have to figure out how to jam and play with other people with just having the chord progression. So yeah, and when I branched off into that concept, I had at the time I've been playing 20 years. You might mute you, okay. Yeah, at the time that when I went into improv, I've been playing for about 15 years. You're giving some feedback, so I'm muting you. At the time, I've been playing for about 15 years, and it's really a huge transition. I mean, it's tough to go from classical playing and reading music to improvisation and ornamentation. Kathy, can you give some insight on that? What's your perspective on that with, kind of changing from reading music to doing improvisation and back and forth, so on? Oh, let me unmute you a second.
Okay, so you have to get rid of your music and just, I started going to a lot of jams with my husband and learning the chords, mostly 1, 4, 5 chords in a lot of the tunes, and learning what those are and learning and just being able to back up. And once you learn the chords, then you can start adding your own little fills and breaks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of a step progression. You can't just go right into it, even if you're an experienced violinist. You have to start with the concept of even doing anything else other than music, right? Start. And then, starting to just, like you said, knowing the chords, and then finding, the progression, the chord change. One way I really learned it and kind of got used to it was just kind of using my instrument as a rhythm, and really kind of feeling that change. That was what helped me the most. So that kind of helped me to solo, basically, to really feel that chord, because that's what sounds best is when the guitar player and the other melody player hits that chord at the same time. So if that's happening, then it's basically tight. It's tight music. Or in a jam, it's pleasant. When people are hitting the rhythm on rhythm. So yeah, Kathy, you can probably relate to the the melody player that's not quite in rhythm, right?
Right.
That happens. You know, everybody's kind of different when it comes to that, the coordination part of it. But yeah, I basically, you know, using the instrument and such, and a metronome, working on, you know, your scales of metronomes, and, you know, basically having in front of you, this is the way I learned improvisation, is I had, you know, here, you know, you got D chord, G chord, D chord. And then what I would do is I would count 4 beats with my instrument. Then I would feel the G chord and do either a G, B, or D. And then basically, you know, for 4 beats, and then find the next chord. So this is kind of how I got started with it. So if I do a progression like D to G to D, so basically I start off, you know, this is the way I would teach a student to do it, real basic. So we have, you know, D to G to D again. So that's the D, and then I'm going to go to the G. And D. Like that. So that's kind of the very basic structure of basically what you're doing there with improvisation. For you guys, that's very basic, obviously, but I have to explain that to start. But then basically I kind of branch off into, you know, starting to change the rhythms up, add ornamentation eventually. And, you know, instead of just hitting a D or a G, I'm actually hitting different notes of the chord to practice, right? So instead of just, you know, starting to add some F sharps in there, some A's in there, but then ultimately I'm trying to hit that chord progression on the downbeat, right? So yeah, if I go from D to G to D again, so I'm going. G. So on. So I'm basically starting to branch off based on the chord progressions. And then from there, I start to add more ornamentation and be more imaginative, right? Because that was to you guys watching, Maeve and Kathy, that's a lame solo. We have to branch off, and we have to do more, and that's what kind of gets people, you know, looking at it and say, wow, that's a cool fiddle solo, right? You know, not just, you know, trying to hit everything right on, you know, like I just did. So yeah, it gets, you know, you can start to be more imaginative and kind of branch into different notes, even stuff that you don't even know you're going to do, and you just do it. You know, you just start to really free your music almost, like you're freeing yourself and being more, having more danger to go into different notes, but then work your way back, you know. So, you know, I'll start to do that a little bit. This bow hair is driving me nuts. So if I'm doing kind of the same thing there, so D, G to D. Adding some grace notes. Hear that? Those are basically fiddle ornaments. So when I'm doing a note just before the note, that's basically an ornamentation thing where it kind of adds that fiddle sound. You know, so instead of just doing, I'm doing, like that. So I'm kind of just adding, being imaginative, sticking to that chord structure. The more you do it, the more it gets easier. But it just takes practice and doing it a lot. So yeah, any questions on that? Cool. I'm gonna give you guys the code for the contest. So all you guys that are watching, I assume you guys are in the contest. I'm giving away a Luger bow worth $1,000, and it's a really nice bow. Anybody that owns this bow will be very happy with it, and I am able to give one away. So if you are watching this right now live, you're going to gain 25 entries in my contest. So the code, I'm going to say it out loud. It is Advanced Wilson. That is the code for the people watching live, or for the people that are watching the recording. For the people that are here right now, the three of us, you are actually going to get a different code that will give you 100 points. Congratulations. You guys are awesome. So I'll give that to you guys at the end here. But yeah, that's the code for the people watching the replay. Cool. Any questions? Anything on that, Kathy, as far as, yeah, I mean, I would love to hear your perspective from doing a lot of jams and different things. Like your perspective on the improv side, it'd be great to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, that was good. What you showed. You just follow the chord progression in the song, and songs that are played. If I don't know them, I just figure I play the chords and then just follow that chord progression in that particular song, and then I'm able to do breaks off of that. So
yeah, it's fun. It starts to become like a fun thing to make your own music that's wasn't there before, right?
Right. Yes, it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yep. It's like a totally different world though. Like you have your classical players that, like they couldn't imagine doing an ornament. It's like, where's the grace note in the music? So, but yeah, it's just a different style and it's fun. So I recommend, if you guys are out there watching, to experiment with fiddle and start to learn the arpeggios, the scales, and you'll start to, even if you're not going to learn fiddle right now, just learning those arpeggios where those letters are on the instrument, that's going to benefit you. With both violin and fiddle, to know the key signatures, to know what you do in various keys. That's really important. So, Maeve, anything you want to add or questions? Is that how you pronounce your name, Maeve? Sorry if it's not. I think you're frozen.
Nope, don't think so. Or not right now.
Okay, no problem.
Maeve. Yeah.
Cool. Jeff, you're sitting there quietly. Did you find benefit from some of the tips? I know started to get maybe a little bit on the tough side since you're just starting. Stuff that you probably wouldn't delve into, but at least you know what to expect and what's in the future, maybe.
No, I really enjoyed it. Like Kathy, I go to a lot of festivals also. I'm more as an observer. And earlier in the webinar, you were talking, a lot of the fiddlers come from a pretty heavy classical background. And observing at some of these, jams and festivals I go to, you can tell the classically trained by their posture. When they're sitting there playing the fiddle, they're straight up and down. And then, like you say, you can see the freelance. I mean, people holding the fiddle down on their forearm. Just crazy stuff. No, real informative. I'm following along with you more as an observer of what I've seen, and now I just need to get my fingers wet.
There you go. Well, it's great to hear that you're getting back into things. And yeah, it's really good. So if you have any questions throughout the week, just feel free to holler at me or whatever.
Will do.
Great. All right. Any other questions? Cool. All right. Well, I will be doing this class, you know, for the next couple weeks. So if you guys want to come next week, I will be at the same time at the 7:00 p.m. Eastern time. And I also have other webinars. Kathy and Maeve, you guys are, you know, more advanced players. I have actually an advanced webinar I'm doing right after this, covering more your classical advanced stuff. That might interest you over this or not. But if you have interest in kind of converting over and trying the other one out, let me know. You can email me that with that interest. It's basically, yeah, michael@violinchack.com. So yeah, if you have any questions at all during the week as well, feel free to let me know. And good luck in the contest. Never know. Somebody with last time when I was doing my last contest, somebody with 8 entries won. Only 8 entries. So they literally like did 1 or 2 things and they won a violin. So it really can happen to anybody. Some people think it's impossible, you know, but it's really not. Anybody can win. So cool. All right. Well, we'll plan on maybe seeing you guys next week. Thanks for coming. Thanks for adding to the discussion. And it was nice to meet you guys.
Thank
I'm
you.
jealous, Kathy, that I'm not in Arizona. We had hail earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was hailing. There's still hail on the porch. So.
Yeah.
So I don't love that, but all right. We'll see you guys maybe next week. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh yeah, I gotta give you guys wait, don't leave yet. I gotta give you guys the code. Okay, so this is the code for you guys to get the 100 entries. So that's unique. I'll copy that down. You guys a second to give me a thumbs up when you have it copied, so I know before I turn or leave the web over here. That's gonna give you okay, great. Kathy, do you have the code? You're working.
I need to see it one more time.
Don't say it out loud, please.
No, I need to see it though. I don't see it.
Oh, okay, it's in the chat. So it's Maeve actually did receive it. It's basically a panel on the side where it says like Zoom webinar chat. It's right there on the side. I've got it. So yeah, it's there's a panel on the bottom, Kathy. It might show different things. If you click on the button that says chat, you click on that, I think it will open it up, the chat box.
Oh,
Not seeing it?
no. Sorry.
That's okay. Okay, I tell you what. Let's make it really easy for you. You can email me, and I will email you back tonight with the code.
All right.
Work?
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. We'll see you guys maybe next week.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.